Before we dive into today's episode, I have something truly special to share. Next September, I'll be leading an intimate women's retreat through the south of France and northern Italy, and you're invited. Picture this: mornings exploring the colorful markets of the French Riviera, afternoons sipping wine, and a hotel view with golden Mediterranean sunsets. Whether you love photography, food, or just want to reconnect with your playful creative self, this trip is designed for you. Spots are limited, so if all this sounds like your kind of adventure, please visit tourwithabsolutely.com and look for the tour France and Italy with Crystal. You can also send me a message or check out the show notes. Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser-known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway. So welcome back to Paris History, Avec, Hemingway. I'm back today with Claudine Hemingway for our regular segment on famous French women. Now, our segment today, I'm very excited about because I know, like me and Claudine, many of you love drinking champagne. And the woman we're talking about today actually had a champagne house, one of the most popular ones known in America. I think you're going to know this person for sure. We're going to be talking about one of the most popular bubbly ladies of French history. So I'm going to let Claudine take it from here and enjoy the show.
Yes, she is definitely. She's also one of my favorites. Also, I say that every single episode we do. Barbe Nicole Ponsardin is what her real name is, but everybody's going to know her a lot better as Veuve. So Barbe was born to very wealthy parents, and at 21 years old, she ended up getting married to Francois Clicquot. Francois Clicquot was the son of Philippe Clicquot, who owned a bunch of textile businesses. He was also involved in banking, and he had some vineyards. And so when they got married, his father said, "Okay, come into the company." But like the winery itself was very small. It's not at all what you would think of today, but it was very small. And once Francois got into the family, he ended up kind of taking it over, extending the business. He started to work with sending it to other countries. They started trying to get it shipped out. So in 1772. When they started the winery, they were shipping out 7,000 bottles a year.
Wow.
So back then, that's a lot. In 1700s, 7,000 bottles a year.
And that was all by boat because there wasn't planes or anything like that.
Yeah, it was all mostly a lot by boats. So in 1801, Philippe decided to retire, and he left the business to his son. And only a few years later, in 1805, Francois died, and he was only 30 years old.
Why did he die?
Well, some say he died of typhoid, but there's also other reports that he might have killed himself.
Ooh.
Yeah, so he was very young. They had been married at that point for 9 years. They had a daughter. She was 6 years old when her father died. But then, here it is. It's just, Madame, now Veuve, means widow in French, Veuve Clicquot. And her father-in-law wanted to sell the business. He was like, we're going to liquidate. We're going to get rid of all this. And Barbe was just, she really urged him not to sell it. She also had a lot of her own family money from her parents. And she just she was convincing him like, no, we can't, like, let's keep this. But at the time, up until with the Napoleonic Code and all of these different rules that they had going back quite a ways in France, a woman couldn't own a business. She couldn't be in charge of a business. The only way around it was if she was a widow. So luckily for Barbe, her husband died. and she was able to take over the business. So he had a trusted friend of his, Louis Baum, who before Francois died was taking care of all of the different stuff around everywhere else. Before he passed away, Francois worked with a man named Louis Baum, and Louis Baum he'd go to Belgium. He was doing a lot of work with other countries, with other places to get the to ship their wine. So at the time, they found a way to get it into Russia.
In Russia?
In Russia. And the champagne of that time was incredibly sweet. Like, it was sweeter than the dessert wines you have now. Like, those dessert wines that you only want to like an ounce or two of. Champagne was sweeter than that then.
Oh God, it was like candy. Wasn't it? I've always wondered, there's been this debate about, I know we're getting a little off course here, but champagne was created by the English, is what I understand.
Champagne, well, originally when it was created, when it was first, I guess we could say created or founded, it was called the Vin Diable, and it was basically the wine of the devil, because they would have these bottles and they'd have yeast in it, and the yeast would basically explode. It would, it'd ferment and it would explode off the cap. And so they call it the devil wine because they couldn't figure out, why is this happening? So
it was like an accident. It was like possessed or something.
Yeah, it was an accident. So that's why, like, a lot of people, say Dom Perignon invented champagne. It kind of had been around a little bit before that. His romantic story of, holding up a glass saying, "Come quickly, I'm tasting the stars."
Yeah.
It's a great story, but it's not exactly true.
Well, yeah. It's more of a fairy tale.
It is. And so it was kind of like champagne is kind of, a lot of it was on accident. A very delicious accident.
Like some of the best things in life, it was an accident.
It was. And over time it became the champagne that we know of it today. But it was originally, it was not at all what we think of today as champagne.
So they got it into Russia.
And they were, they loved it. The Russian czars and, all of the hoi polloi in Russia loved it. And so at the time, there was also a bunch of naval blockades. And so it was make it really hard for them to travel on the waterways to get it in there. This is the 18th century, late 18th century, early 19th century France. You didn't exactly just like, let's throw it on his truck and drive it over there. So they had a lot of issues with that. So she did everything she could. She had chartered boats from Dutch boats to take the champagne to Russia. And the first time she did it, they sent 10,000 bottles.
Wow.
Which is a lot. 10,000 bottles of champagne to Russia, and it sold out. It sold in just a few weeks. It was gone.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So she sent another ship right after that of 13,000 bottles, and it, again, same thing. It was all just completely gobbled up. So Tsar Alexander I, his brother declared that it was the only champagne he was going to drink.
That is a great market.
Exactly. It was the only one he was going to drink was Veuve Clicquot. So in 1814, she was basically she was famous, especially in Russia. She was like, everybody knew her name. Everybody knew her wine.
Wow.
And so she, at this time, she was also, she's the very first woman to head a champagne house.
Yeah, I'm still very surprised her father-in-law gave her money to help her and let her take it over, because I thought he wanted to just stop it when the son died, right?
Yeah, he did. He wanted to just liquidate it and just get rid of it. And she just was like, no, she didn't want to do that. During the process, when you're making champagne, it is a little bit different than when you're making wine in general. You do have the yeast in there, and you have to the sediment. So you need to get, you've been to some of the champagne houses, you do the tours and they show you the racks. So those the wood kind of a pyramid shaped rack, and it has holes in it, and those are called a riddling rack. And what they do is they put the champagne in there, and they're at an angle, and you have these men that even still today they do this, that they could go in there and then they kind of shake the bottle, they kind of pull the bottles out a little, they twist them a little bit, and then shove them back in really hard, because you're trying to get all of that down to the top of the neck of the bottle.
So it's all the sediment in there?
All the sediment, yeah. So they're trying to get all that. At that point, the bottles only have just like a cap, like you'd have on a bottle of Coke. Madame Clicquot, they're trying to figure out how, like how to solve this problem. They didn't have this. So one night she goes home, takes her dining room table and cuts holes in it.
Oh, wow. That's so cool.
So she's the one who created the riddling rack.
She was a
She
revolutionary.
was a revolutionary. So it's like that's one of my favorite stories. But she cut this holes in her table and then brought it in the next day, which is like, hey, let's do like, what if we could do this? And they're still used. If you go into any champagne house, a lot of the really big ones, they now have machines that could do this, like big, huge metal boxes that they could put in like, hundreds of bottles, and then they just ship the contraption just moves a little bit instead of the person doing all the bottles switching.
Yeah.
So, but she's the one who came up with that whole idea.
It's like still the same idea they use today. It's like typical French, just carrying on the tradition.
Yeah. It's so cool. But you just think of like, was she just sitting at her table one day and going,
Let me cut some holes in this baby. I mean, that's wild, especially to lose her husband at such a young age. She had a child. She was a single mom running a business.
She was a single mom and basically running, she was one of the first women to ever run an international company at that too.
I mean, I wonder, her family has to have been very supportive of her, like to let her do all that stuff, because women were just not allowed to do things.
Yeah, they weren't. They definitely were not allowed to do that. And, I think she had, a lot of support, her own family and her, her parents she was close with. And Philippe was very, very encouraging of her until he died as well. But during that time when all the naval blockades were going on and people couldn't get, she was finding any way she could to ship these bottles. She was working and coming up with plans. So after 4 years, when these blockades were finally lifted, she was heads and shoulders above any other champagne house or winery.
Because she had already done international and made the ties, and she was way advanced.
Yeah, so she had been working on this, like she kept coming up with plans and how could she do this. So by 1814, they were now making 400,000 bottles of wine.
Oh my God! And do we know how many people were working at her champagne house?
I think there was probably quite a few. Champagne isn't, champagne takes a long time to make. You don't just bottle it and release it, a few weeks later. So you've got a lot of people that are, down there. The winery itself, Veuve Clicquot. The first time I went to Paris, my friend and I went to Champagne for the weekend. I had to go to the mothership.
Yeah, of course. Oh my God. It's so fun to go to Champagne for the weekend. It's a must do when you visit Paris, because it's only like a 1 hour train ride.
Oh yeah. I think it's like, 45 minutes to an hour.
It's so fast. Yeah.
It's so fast.
$10, €10.
The winery, Veuve Clicquot, it was, I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm here. Everything has, that's the yellow flags and there's this and that. But you do a tour where you go down into the chalk cellars and you go down there and they're exactly the same. I mean, they say that there's more miles of cellars under the streets of the Champagne region than there are streets itself.
I believe it. I mean, it's so many champagne houses in just one little small area.
So, and the whole time I'm thinking like, oh, was, Madame Clicquot walking around down here checking on the bottles. And
it's so wild. And did she ever remarry or anything like that?
She didn't. She was, basically a widow for the rest of her life. And just kind of just doing everything she could to, save this. Like when she was almost on the brink of bankruptcy once, that's when she was like, well, let's see if we can get this champagne out to, England. And, I think it's, I think I read one time that it's basically like the Queen's official champagne.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure on that. I read that one time, but it's like, that's basically the chosen one for anytime the Queen has champagne.
The royalty. What a honor, to be working with the czars and queens. Like, how wild is that, this small town? I mean, she did come from a rich family, so maybe she had the connections that way and knew how to talk to a wealthier class. But that's so fascinating.
Yeah, and it's so neat. Like if you open up a bottle, the top of the cork has a anchor on it, and it's a nod back to their business. Basically her business was created by the water. Like she was shipping, the champagne everywhere. And so they have this, the top of the bottle has a little anchor. The cage itself that holds the cork down has a little picture of her. So there's a little picture of, Madame Clicquot. And the color of the label, they were trying to figure out a label for it. And at first, wine didn't have labels on it. It was just, here's these bottles. Here we go. And so when they first did that, they were trying to figure out a color for it, and they wanted something distinct and something to stand out. And one day somebody had a egg yolk, like a chicken egg yolk, and they saw it, and the French egg yolks are just like, eggs are just so much better there. And compared to the American, processed, and
happy chicken.
They're much happier. And this is that beautiful orangey yellow color. And that's where they got the color of the label.
Oh, that's so cool. I always love that color. It really pops.
Yeah. It's just such a happy color.
Happy with the bubbles.
Happy with the bubbles. But she ended up living to be 89 years old.
Wow.
And she died on July 29th, 1866. At that time, they were doing 750,000 bottles a year.
That's so crazy. She lived such a long life. That's probably why she lived so long. She never remarried. She didn't have a man telling her what to do.
I don't have time for that.
I'm an entrepreneur.
But she, at one point, she also had changed, she had kind of created her own label that was the label that we know now today is the label that basically she kind of spun off and created away from, Philippe Clicquot's bottle. So basically what we know today was what she actually created. And she ended up she was like the first woman to ever take over a champagne house and the first female champagne producer and one of the first women to ever lead an international company.
That's so wild. So she was groundbreaking on so many levels and a graphic designer, apparently.
Yeah. And she was so highly revered that when she died, they called her La Grande Dame de la Champagne.
Oh, I want to be called that when I die.
I know.
That's such a great name.
And they have they do one of the champagnes called La Grande Dame. And when I went to the wine, and I love Veuve Clicquot. I mean, I just love champagne in general. It's got to be French. It's got to be bubbly. But when I went there, afterwards they take you downstairs and you could do a tasting. And so we had it where you had the Veuve Clicquot that we all know that we could get, any day at any grocery store. And it's tried that, and it's like, oh, delicious. And then they opened up a bottle of La Grande Dame, and you drank that, and it was like, oh, what was this other stuff I was drinking?
Why did I bother?
What was this supermarket? It was just kind of like, oh my God, this is so amazing. It's definitely a lot more expensive to get the La Grande Dame bottle. I think at least twice as much expensive, but so delicious.
What was the taste difference for you? Was it more dry? Was it more bubbly?
It had more dry. It was definitely drier and had a little bit more of that biscuit. There's always that biscuit taste.
Yeah,
champagne. It was very smooth. I mean, it definitely when you tried it next to the other one, the regular Veuve Clicquot, it tasted sweeter.
Interesting.
But in 1972, the Champagne House created the Veuve Clicquot Bonsardin Award for women entrepreneurs, and it still goes on to this day, and it happens in 18 different countries.
Oh, that's so great. She led the way for women in so many ways.
Yeah, so many ways. And then, eventually the house was purchased by LVMH, Louis Vuitton, Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, which is
you're right. Yep.
Luxury brand in the world. And today they do 4 million bottles a day.
4 million a day.
Yeah. Or a year. I'm sorry.
I was like, how the heck did they do that? A year. Wow. We were talking about earlier before we started recording that I was out there and I couldn't even get into the Champagne House because, they do tours and it's booked out for weeks and months ahead. I went next door to Pomar. I was like, whatever.
Since I've gone back to Champagne a few times and I've gone to different houses, Taittinger, I've been down to in Epernay, I've been to a few places. And honestly, as much as I love Veuve Clicquot, I wasn't that impressed with the tour. I kind of thought, you guys make so much money on on selling your product just because of marketing. I just thought they could have done it they could have done so much more with the tour. I mean, it was really cool to go down into the caves during World War One. Because there was a lot of the fighting in World War One was in the Champagne region, and so all these houses, put everything downstairs. There was people living down there. So the cellars of Veuve Clicquot were actually like the hospital.
And like bomb shelters.
Yeah. And so when you go in there today, you still could see red crosses painted on the walls in the chalk. That's because it was hospitals, and it was medics, and they were taking care of people, and thousands of people were living underground. And that was like fascinating. But I kind of just thought, as what your label is, I thought there was like, the event planner in me could really help them out a little.
Okay, if you're listening, hire Claudine.
Yes. But it still was pretty amazing to be there. I mean, I'm sure there's nothing other than the cellars that remains like it was when she was there, of course, because now, the glitzy little waiting room. But, if you could go to any place in the Champagne region, you're kind of going to get the same shtick.
Yeah, I feel like they all have their own little spin, but it's also just so cool to go into the buildings because they're beautiful, and to go down. You think some of the caves are haunted. I mean, the war times and hospitals, they never talk about ghosts in France.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's got to be something.
Yeah, I found that really interesting when I got to France, because the Anglo-Saxon culture that we have, that's what they call like Americans and Brits and all that. We're really into like the ghost culture and things being haunted. Yeah. But I would think everything in France is haunted because of the revolution and all the history and World War II. And I was like, why don't they talk about ghosts? But they do not. There is no talk about like haunted places. It's
well,
just
there
not.
were like some brutal deaths. I mean,
yes,
deaths,
the guillotine. Come on.
Yeah, you would think that they when I went to Taittinger, they you go down and you're in the caves. That was a really cool tour, and it's really close to Veuve Clicquot. And we went down there, and then you're way down there, and you look up, and it's the cave is 3 stories high above you, and they're like, oh well, these were dug out in Roman times, and I'm just like, oh my God.
Yes, it's so old.
Like, these are so old. And I was standing there just like in awe, and anybody else on the tour just kept walking. And I just was like, oh, and you could touch the wall, which is really weird. It's kind of a little damp and almost humid from the, just because you're underground. And it's really, really fascinating.
Yeah, I definitely recommend like going to any of the houses, because it is the history. And like we said, it's so easy. You jump on the train. It's literally like 45 minutes, like 20 euros to get out there. And there's all these little cute hotels and like bed and breakfasts. Like, just make a weekend out of it. You don't even have to drive, No,
and there's just like, there's the cathedral, the Notre Dame de Reims cathedrals there. And it's not that fair. It's not, it's probably a good 20-minute walk if you went there from Veuve Clicquot. But that is a cathedral that most of the kings of France were all coronated in.
No, I didn't know that.
Which is really fascinating. It was bombed pretty bad in World War I and had to get, they reconstructed it. But in the back of it, they also have some stained glass windows that were done by Marc Chagall, which he's one of my favorite too. But it's put right out front. That's where Joan of Arc had gone. And so there's a big statue of her out in front. But I mean, just to go down there and then just see all those places. And it's a village. It's kind of a nice little village in the summer.
Yeah.
It's a little busier, but there's
so walk around
houses, and definitely go see some of the big guys. Go see the Taittinger and Veuve and all of those guys, but then also just find some of the smaller houses, because those are going to be, I always like to find some of the small guys where it's 1 or 2 people that are the only ones involved in the entire process.
And there's a ton of them, and the tastings are very cheap, especially at the smaller houses. And there's some where you can sit outside, and it's just lovely. I definitely recommend like 2 days. You don't need a ton of time out there, but take some time, like a weekend. I also read that she survived the French Revolution. She was a child during the French Revolution.
She was just like tiny. It was 1777.
Yeah, and then they had to sneak her out of school because she was in like this super rich people prep school, and they were killing anybody related to wealth and kingdom back then. So they kind of had to sneak her out and get her home.
Yeah,
and then she survived was like the Napoleonic Wars as well.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. She kind of made it through everything.
Yeah, she's definitely a fascinating woman. So you can tell all these little secrets while you're drinking your bubbles. You'll seem so much more educated with your champagne.
Yeah. She would not, some people will say that somebody once said the champagne coupe, the little saucer. There's been years where people say, it was shaped from Marie Antoinette's breast. That's not true. Somebody one time said it was shaped from Madame Clicquot's, and that's not true. But, it's always fun things you could tell at parties anyway.
Yeah, I mean, who's going to fact check you? We're all drunk.
Yeah.
Pull out the Google.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of that stuff could get a little confusing anyway, because it was so long ago and there's so many stories that have been rewritten. So it's like everything's a little true.
It is. Yeah, everything. There's a little bit of truth in it. There was at one point, they did actually make a martini, kind of a more of martini shaped glass from the shape of Kate Moss, the models of her breasts. So it seems like maybe, that was a lot later than the Marie Antoinette days in Veuve Clicquot, but it happened at one point.
Yeah, boobs. That was some interesting boob shape, if that was true.
I know. My friend, he worked at a bar, and they always had these big ones, and then I always said, I want the boob glass, the big glass.
And do you know the history of why they put it in that shape of a glass? It's for taste and bubbles, correct?
It is. Personally, like a lot of times you see when most people serve champagne in a flute, which is, what you'll see almost everywhere. The coupe isn't actually one of the best glasses for it because it is so shallow and wide that the bubbles can't really travel as much. I just think they're gorgeous. Like a little coupe is so pretty. The best glass to actually have champagne in is more of a wine glass. So, the flute kind of, that's what I just think everybody always, but it's like the flutes are smaller. A wine glass holds more.
Yeah, I mean, let's think about portion control, guys.
When in doubt, go with the wine glass. It's gonna
keep the party going.
It's gonna hold a lot more of the good stuff.
I love it. I'm a huge fan of champagne too. It makes me so happy. You know how different alcohol has different effects on your emotions. I feel like,
and then a lot of the champagne industry in general. A lot of people think of champagne as something you have on a special occasion. I will have it. I'm happy to have it any single day.
Same.
But they've worked a long time to try to get past that, because a lot of people would think, and I've had friends tell me like, oh, I never think of drinking champagne. I'm like, oh, I have it all the time.
Yeah. It must be tough for them to get out of that, because it does limit their customers.
Yes. Yeah. Looking for big occasions, but
let's be the advocates for drinking champagne every day.
There you go. And then raise a glass and, cheers to Veuve Clicquot.
I think that's a great way to end the show today. Yeah. Have a glass of champagne today, guys. You do not need a reason to celebrate. Every day is a reason to celebrate.
That's true.
Until next week. Yeah, exactly. More reason to drink. Thank you, Claudine, and I will talk to you next week.
Merci. Thank you for listening to Paris History Avec a Hemingway. If you want to find out some more, you could always find me on my Instagram page, Claudine Bleu Blanc Rouge, and that's BLEU, as in the French way to spell it. And each day I post a daily history lesson about a person or a place or something in Paris, or it's lots of fun facts. And then also at ClaudineHemingway.com, where you can also sign up for my newsletter there.